Oh, good gracious we're finally here. 2 years ago, I officially put the cap on my infamous 13-part, 3-hour-long Pixar Family Tree Timeline Shared Universe dissertation. Near the very end, I claimed I had plans to weave my way through a multiversal interchange of sorts and dissect the next of Pixar's shared universes. I claimed Monsters, Inc. would be critical, and I was not lying. So here we are, finally. After ages of subconscious planning, I have something quite solid that may or may not give my DreamWorks dissertation a run for its money. This one I forecast to be around the same total length as my previous Pixar mega theory, so 2 or 3 hours. This one is much more wild, however. The first dissertation brought together a whole bunch of my other theories, like my Gusto videos and my Emma Jean videos and my Finding Nemo videos. This one functions somewhat similarly. I'll most likely drag in my theories on Roz syndrome and the National Supers Agency. But today we take the interchange, because before we dive headfirst into the infinite Mobius Matryoshka, I must first transition a number of smaller things and start by proving a point about a man I've been targeting for years, and that man is Horst. Upon finally gaining the conclusions that I have, I am allowing him to show us the way forward, and dear God if it isn't amazing. Hello, I'm the Theorizer. For ages now, I've been promising to discuss how I think Remy's father, or more likely mother, was the rat-controlling Gusto himself, and this led to the mother's death, which all wraps back around and explains why both the father is so hateful towards humans and why they live in Gusto's mother's house. See my first Pixar dissertation. Remy knew all the recipes, he was tutored by Gusto. There's a lot more evidence too, and it all sort of comes together, so if you'd still like me to make a video on that, I suppose I can, but I don't know where to fit it. This was a problem for me, so I decided that I'd bridge the gap between these two collective theories in another way, using my backup plan, which is Horst. Horst is the mysterious, aggressive sous chef in Ratatouille, and he seems to have some mysterious backstory. He has been arrested in the past, but whenever people ask him what for, he seems to change his story. He gives no less than 4 reasons in one movie. He says he defrauded a major corporation. He then says he robbed the second largest bank in France with only a ballpoint pen. Then he says he tore a hole in the ozone layer above southeastern France before finally wrapping up and claiming he murdered someone with his bare thumb. There's continuity in his stories as well, such as how he later shows his thumb to the exiled Chef Skinner before assaulting him. I have great reason to believe that Horst has neither lied nor exaggerated a single story he has given out. I have reason to believe he has in fact done all 4 of these things, and it sounds like quite a life, right? Yes, because he single-thumbedly destroyed something critical. Here's where things get interesting. Throughout nearly all of Pixar's films, there is a notorious corporation known as BNL, which has been theorized on almost to death, as it is essentially responsible for a lot of the mystery of Pixar. It's mainly focused on in WALL-E, where they are the company that dominated the world and was responsible for the AI uprising and spaceships. BNL is short for by and large, and I used them to prove a point in my first Pixar dissertation as well. You see, anytime you see a shady corporation in these films, BNL tends to be responsible in one way or another. The only faces we really get to see would probably be the men in suits from Up, assuming they do have ties back into this. It's funny, another theory I've wanted to make for around 5 years now is on the matter of Russell's dad. I pondered over a number of characters, and this man in the suit near Carl's house fit best in every possible way, but I noticed others had talked about this elsewhere, so I never really wanted to make a dedicated video on it. Either way, I do believe BNL is responsible here as well, considering their constant attempts at world domination. I'm just saying this so I can give a face to the name for the time being and make it easier for now, because if you haven't realized what I'm getting at yet, well, it's that BNL has a very obvious tie to all of Horst's stories, and I don't know if a single person has connected this yet. He claims he robbed a bank and defrauded a major corporation, and this all sounds very BNL-ish to me, considering they're the primary corporation in Pixar films and they're all about money. What comes next helps even more. He claims he tore a hole in the ozone layer above Avignon. This should sound frighteningly familiar to you, considering BNL is almost solely remembered in these films for being the one who annihilated Earth's atmosphere and then left it all together. Horst finishes by claiming claiming he killed a man with his bare thumb. I have reason to believe all these stories are connected to BNL. Major corporation, money, ozone layer, murder. My final connection is the biggest one of all. I was thinking about Horst and his job as a chef, well, assassin, but also chef, and I was thinking about what sorts of things that could tie back into, particularly within the other 4 franchises in the first dissertation. And then it sort of all hit me at once. BNL owns everything, including the batteries in the toy Buzz Lightyear. They are fixated on space travel, and I'll elaborate on this later, but I have great reason to believe that BNL owns the Pizza Planet chain and the Buzz Lightyear chain. They are prepping the world for space travel. Horst saw this in the restaurant business, and he killed their CEO, Russell's dad, with his bare thumb. You may think this is a leap, but all I ask is that you give me time, in later videos too, to prove all this, because I'm not even close to done. And it's a mess right now, obviously. I say all of this because BNL shows signs of not just being in this main Pixar pentalogy quintet universe I've been studying in my previous dissertation, but they're in all of them. All universes. How is this possible? How can BNL transcend universes and be in WALL-E and Cars and all of this stuff? This is going to come out of left field for almost all of you. I think the BNL Corporation is the evil force out to control the infinite Mobius Matryoshka. I was going to wait. I wasn't going to do this now. I was just going to hint at Horst and BNL and the next universe and then wait. But I can't stall any longer on what I think is happening here. Not as I find more and more proof as I literally type this script. For months now, you may have seen me ramble on about an infinite Mobius Matryoshka on Twitter or YouTube, wherever. I'm going to get it over with and state my thesis now. We're in the right mindset, so why not? There's an important distinction that must be made if we are to progress with the next Pixar universe as I promised 2 years ago. The structure I have built to allow my Pixar theories to function is not capable of supporting multiple universes in the form it takes at this time. Pixar has far too many inconsistencies to all be a single timeline, but far too many consistencies to completely be fragmented across multiple. There must be significant overlap to allow any of this to work. The 5-way binding of Toy Story, Finding Nemo, Up, Ratatouille, and Inside Out took me half a decade, the Pixar pentalogy. I tried adding more franchises to the pentalogy, but the problem was that it became increasingly unstable, and I keep promising this return with a battle plan to attack the other films and their connections in a way that wouldn't violate what I'd already stated. Monsters, Inc. and The Incredibles, to my knowledge, can achieve this because they are well known at this point to be highly connected, only beat out by the pentalogy. There are problems at Pixar, you see. Easter eggs belong where they shouldn't, contradictions exist where they cannot, paradox on top of paradox, and this requires a workaround like no other. The famous and inspiringly clever Pixar Theory timeline by John Negroni, and added to by the Super Carlin brothers of course, is excellent in terms of overall theme and narrative. It's one of the most fascinating concepts I have ever seen, but it gets very frustrating and confusing, almost in a way, when it comes to some of the more obscure one-to-one logical correlations, which is why I could only get 5 films out of it when I tried sealing the timeline and family tree with genetics, surnames, timing, locations. Okay then, maybe there are several different universes. That's the belief most people have been under all this time. That's not even a theory, really. That's just more of a complicated way of describing the fact that each film is its own world, a multiverse, and then remain under the assumption that some films share a universe. Bingo. Done. That's what I've been doing. But then there's still overlapping. Shared universes where they cannot be shared. Overlap where there can be none. This means there must be something truly strange going on, and I finally have a way of describing all of this that works. It's basically just me saying, "Look at all these inconsistencies," but from a different angle. An angle that will orient us in a direction that will allow for more universes to exist unhindered. This is where things are about to get complicated. Because what exactly do I mean by impossible overlap? Well, I can give a really simple example right now. In Boo's bedroom in Monsters, Inc., we see Jessie and Nemo. This is not Jessie, and this is not Nemo. Jessie was a one-of-a-kind doll and cannot exist here, yet she does. If you don't believe that, well, Nemo is literally a random clownfish from the ocean, and yet here he is. It's his model, his face, his character, but it's not him. This is a toy based off of him, but not in the context of him being some random toy based on a random fish some dentist captured in Australia. No, Nemo must be famous in some other way. Just like how this is not Jessie. These are not the characters, these are toys. It's a toy, based off of the famous rare artifact of Jessie from the Toy Story films. This is literally Pixar merchandise. This is our answer. This is how Easter eggs pan out into the logical substructure of a fictional multiverse. Each Pixar narrative is a fictional narrative within the universe of every other narrative. What I am saying is that each Pixar movie or series takes place within its own world, where, in the Emeryville, California of that fictional world, there is a fictional Pixar making all of the films they've been making, which themselves contain fictional Pixars making fictional films that contain all other films, including the origin film to begin with. It is recursion to a dimensional degree as high as the number of universes that can ultimately exist here, maximum being the number of films they've made. But as I have gone into before, there are noteworthy clusters that, if dealt with carefully, can permit shared universes when applicable. This is a recursive, fictional stack with many tangents in all sorts of directions. It is Inception gone rogue. It is metafiction gone rogue. It is a Russian nesting doll, a matryoshka, a self-containing, paradoxical multiverse with haywire tangents strewn throughout. The two universes of most critical importance are the pentalogy and the duology I have hinted at. For now, this duology universe contains only Monsters, Inc. and The Incredibles to my knowledge. These two universes, the pentalogy and the duology, are locked in the harshest, most aggressive dual recursion in the whole system, and I aptly refer to their link as an infinite Mobius matryoshka. Up until this point, I've represented these two universes as the shadow of a tesseract, because it illustrates the point quite well, and how this sort of meta-structure could likely exist with remarkable ease in higher dimensions. I think it's easier to illustrate, but honestly, I'd need a 3D modeler to get it right because it's kind of hard to illustrate a Mobius strip on paper. What am I even doing? I'm trying to convey this through a Mobius strip, but it's not two-sided. I think what I was going for was the Mobius strip contorted into the shape of an infinity figure so as to convey the continuity on one hand but the duality on the other. This won't pan out given the additions of other pocket universes though, so I'll stick with this neat little illustration. Maybe I'll rename it later. So now to my big point, which is that I have reason to believe Monsters, Inc. and The Incredibles share a universe. One that overlaps with the pentalogy by containing it as a fictional world while simultaneously being a fictional world within it. In this new universe I'm mapping, Monsters, Inc. would be the future and The Incredibles would be the past. I say this because of obvious things such as how superheroes are evolved humans and monsters are evolved humans to a much further extent, but we still see such beings as an owl monster in Incredibles 2 to further prove this point. In addition, these two films have been rigorously tied together by other theorists for years now, notably in theories that state Boo is a superhero of some sort, with her possibly even being Violet Parr, which again are all theories by the Super Carlin brothers and Seamus Gorman if I recall. And while I don't have anything specific to say on those matters, I do think Boo is a superhero, which is why Randall was so desperate for her, and why he'd likely already tested on her dozens of other times like the energy ball she is, as she somehow knew exactly how to open the secret entrance. She also obviously disappears and reappears at will, and I tend to stay away from these other theories aside from thumbnails or brief skip-throughs, but I assume this is the sort of thing that was discussed in them. There's also a ton of bonus disc evidence nobody seems to talk about that implies Monsters, Inc. to be in the far future beyond the idea that it was poetic for the famous Pixar theory, but I'll go into that infamous bonus disc in a later, equally crucial video. The point is, simply, that I believe The Incredibles is the past and Monsters, Inc. is the future of the same timeline. This timeline is in a paradox with another timeline, the pentalogy. The paradox is not of a temporal nature, but of a metafictional one. Each one contains the other one ad infinitum. Now that we've established the major point, we must loop back around to the initial mind blow. What was my theory? Oh yes, BNL's role in all of this. As I said, I think their goal is to dominate the multiverse on every single level they can fathom. Logic would dictate that the Pixar short films are the truly smaller sub-nodes, and ubiquitous Easter eggs such as A113 and the Pizza Planet truck are the connective tissue of this Russian nest, as it were. Harkening back to the first dissertation, some Easter eggs are more irrefutable than others. Riley being in the Marine Life Institute, bulletproof. Emma Jean postcard, solid. Darla being on the cover of Molly's magazine, flimsy but doable. But Nemo in Boo's bedroom, absolutely f***ing impossible. Enter the Matryoshka. To my knowledge, every film has a Pizza Planet truck and A113 as Easter eggs. This is well known, except for these two. Many people have searched, but it's always slightly off, not quite there. No truck in The Incredibles and no code in Monsters, Inc. There's importance. I have come to the ultimate conclusion that this corporation plans to unite the infinite Mobius Matryoshka using Easter eggs. I'm not sure if they know this, but that would be catastrophic, like the collision of two black holes. I was tentative with this at first. I mean, it's just a really complicated way of describing what's already happening, but it's still quite meta. That was until I started writing this and I remembered the bombshell of unimaginable legitimization of my claims. I swear, I have no idea how this keeps happening, but it does. It just dawned on me that Pixar has been planning a meta film for quite some time now, one that not only is directly in line with this metafictional premise, but the BNL evidence as well. Pixar is planning to release a complicated movie known as Lightyear, which is, I swear to God, a film within a film about outer space centered around the toys the film merchandises. This is beat for beat my entire premise! Why does this keep happening to me? I can only keep it in for so long, what the f***? It's literally a film that takes place within the Toy Story universe, and it's the movie that the Buzz Lightyear toy was based on, which as we know has ties back to B&L. It was even as complicated for them to explain this when they announced it. My theory is that B&L is releasing this film as outer space propaganda to prepare the multiverse for their ascension in WALL-E, and this means that all of the fictional Pixars are controlled by B&L as they plan to unite the multiverse using Easter eggs. The fictional Pixar is B&L. Horst caught wind of everything and killed their CEO, which only sped up their plans for domination of the space-time nest. Funny enough, the Toy Story films already have Russian nesting dolls in them, to begin with. Foreshadowing gone awry yet again. At this point, I'm straight up gonna say that Joe Gardner wrote the jazzy score for Monsters, Inc. Alright, so these details are fuzzy, but give me time. In this meantime, we need to set up the rest of the second dissertation. Obviously, it's much more wild in premise than a mere family tree timeline, but fortunately it's not nearly as difficult as it sounds. We simply have to keep establishing the Monsters, Inc. Incredibles shared duology universe, and simultaneously keep it within the boundaries of this whole multiversal structure. Just like last time, old theories will be incorporated in, filling out the runtime and keeping things interesting while giving you access to every single detail I've ever pondered. We're going to start with The Incredibles because there's a lot going on there, and I feel like B&L has ties to their government. With that in mind, following this video, the playlist I will soon link will contain my theory trilogy on Syndrome and his backstory and his plans. I want to keep Monsters, Inc. in your mind, so then it'll jump over to my trilogy of theories on Roz and Mr. Waternoose because they too are shady. Keeping fresh again, we'll hop back to The Incredibles and you'll be seeing a couple theories I made in 2019 that you might have missed when I released them. They were quite interesting. Basically, it's a theory on the government in Incredibles 2, and then a theory on the government in Incredibles 1. We needed the sequel to solve the first film, and I did that a while ago. Now here's where things get interesting because we'll be done incorporating old theories at this point. So here's where I'll be uploading my ever-teased Baby Smitty theory, and maybe finally that theory on Edna Mode I've been wanting to do for a while. Once we're done with that, the time will come to sort the logic like we did in the first dissertation. Remember? Sorting genetics, timing, locations, that sort of thing. Once we've sorted the duology timeline, then will come the overlap theories and how it all ties back through the multiverse into the first dissertation. We good? Good. In the meantime, I gotta get back to Mort and Katie. Now those theories are the craziest. If you don't know, Mort is the Grim Reaper and Katie infiltrates other universes to eat them. You know, I've been looking in Boo's bedroom for clues, and